Almost every web application you have ever used, an e-commerce store, a banking portal, a social feed is built on the same structural skeleton. In this video, we are going to take that skeleton apart, understand why it exists, and learn how to reason about it clearly. Imagine an application where the button that the user clicks is in the same file as the tax calculation logic, which is also talking directly to the database. That was the reality of early desktop and web software. The pain was real. You could not change a business rule without risking the UI, you could not scale just the slow part, and every developer was one mistake away from corrupting shared data. Think of a busy restaurant. The front of house handles the guest experience. The kitchen applies culinary logic, recipes, timing, quality checks. The pantry holds the raw ingredients, tightly controlled. Nobody in the dining room wanders into the pantry. That clean separation of concerns is exactly what three-tier architecture brings to software. Three-tier architecture divides a system into three physically separate layers. The presentation tier is whatever the user touches, a browser, a mobile app. The application tier is a dedicated server that holds all business logic, the rules, calculations, and decisions your system makes. The data tier is the database, accessible only through the application tier. Each layer runs on its own machines and communicates with the next over the network. Follow a single user action. A customer clicks place order. The browser, the presentation tier, sends that request across the network to the application server. The application tier validates the order, checks inventory, and calculates the total all the business rules. Only then does it cross a second network boundary to query the database. The database returns raw records, the application tier shapes them into a response, and the browser renders the confirmation page. The client never speaks to the database directly. That is the key consequence of this design. Three-tier architecture shines when you need flexibility and scale. Multiple front-ends, a web app and a mobile app, can share one application tier, and you can add app servers without touching your database. But every tier boundary is a network hop, and that adds latency and operational complexity. For a small internal tool or a weekend project, the overhead of managing three separate deployment targets often costs more than the separation saves. When you start a new web project, reach for three-tier as your baseline. The single most important discipline is keeping business logic off the client and off the database. It belongs entirely in the application tier. Define the contracts between tiers early. What does the presentation tier send, and what does it expect back? That contract lets teams work in parallel. When performance problems arise, identify which tier is the bottleneck and scale that one independently. Three-tier architecture is not a trend. It is the proven structural answer to a problem every web system faces. How do you keep presentation, logic, and storage from tangling together as complexity grows? Separate the tiers physically, enforce clean boundaries between them, and you gain a system where each part can evolve, scale, and be maintained independently. That is why it remains the default starting point for web architecture today.